Why the hell did you call him down here, huh?
Beneath the gleaming glass of the downtown skyline, Marcus Drake leaned back in the plush leather chair of a VIP lounge, a champagne flute in his hand. The bubbles danced like a fleeting victory. He was untouchable. The ink had barely dried on the divorce papers. Yet here he was, toasting his triumph. In his mind, he had won. He had maneuvered his wife, Jade, out of her inheritance, and now she was left with nothing. He laughed to himself, texting his mistress, "I'm free. Let's celebrate tonight." The feeling of absolute power washed over him as he swirled the champagne. He thought about Jade, sitting across from him in the courtroom, trying so hard to keep it together. Her eyes were glassy, her face pale and drawn, but there was something in the way she looked at him. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else, something he couldn't quite place. Marcus smiled smugly, the weight of the courtroom victory settling in. The judge had practically handed him everything. Their share home in the hills, the luxury car, and more than half of their joint assets. Jade had barely fought back, like a deer caught in headlights. It was a game to him, and he had played it like a master. At the bar, his lawyer, Derek Haynes, toasted with him, his thin lips curling into a smirk. "Well, Marcus, looks like you won. Clean cut. We outsmarted her." "Of course," Marcus responded, savoring the taste of his perceived success. She was always weak. She didn't know how to play the game. Too bad for her. I need someone with a drive, not someone who's content with a cozy life and no ambition. Derek chuckled, sipping his drink. "Yeah, and her family, they were nothing. You've crushed her." The two men clinked glasses, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the walls of the lounge. Outside, the gray skies reflected the emotional weight of what had been done, but Marcus was too far gone in his arrogance to notice. He was too busy planning his next move. After all, he had already chosen his next victim, Jessica, a younger, more vibrant version of Jade, without the weight of family expectations. Let's get this over with. I want to see the look on her face when the judge finalizes everything. Let's go. They left the lounge, strolling with the confidence of kings, unaware that someone was watching from afar. Marcus didn't see the gray sedan parked across the street, nor the man with a camera snapping photos of him laughing, still reveling in his supposed victory. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense, the smell of lemon polish mixing with the polished wood. It usually intimidated most people, but for Marcus, it felt like home, like a throne he was about to claim. He sat with his back straight, eyes scanning the room as if he owned it. On the other side, Jade sat motionless, her lawyer, Eleanor, beside her. They looked like a pair of mismatched underdogs, poised to be swept aside. Let's get this over with, Marcus thought, his eyes never leaving Jade's face. She looked smaller than before, the weight of the divorce crushing her. Her once vibrant, confident aura now felt like a distant memory. Jade wasn't the same woman he had married. She had faded into something weak, pathetic in his eyes. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced, and Marcus stood with the air of a victor. He was ready for the final blow. As the judge entered, Marcus's smug expression didn't falter. Judge Melinda Harris was no nonsense, known for her stern demeanor and swift decisions. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and gave both sides a long look before speaking. "We're here today for the final dissolution of the marriage between Marcus Drake and Jade Drake. I understand a settlement has been proposed." Derek rose, smooth and confident, his voice clear. "Yes, Your Honor. We've reached an agreement that's both generous and fair. My client, Marcus Drake, is offering spousal support for a year and will allow Mrs. Drake to keep her personal vehicle. In return, Mr. Drake will retain the house and all business assets." The words felt empty, like a rehearsed script. As Derek spoke, Marcus's eyes flicked to Jade. She didn't seem to fight for herself. She was silent, clutching her hands tightly together. Her lawyer, Eleanor, stood up slowly. "Your Honor, we have a few reservations," Eleanor said softly, her voice shaking but firm. "There are discrepancies in the disclosure of certain assets." Derek scoffed audibly. "Your Honor, that's a delay tactic. We provided all the necessary documents. If Mrs. Drake's counsel hasn't read them, That's not Mr. Drake's problem. Jade didn't respond. She simply stared at the floor. Marcus smirked. This is it, he thought. She's done. Your Honor, Eleanor said, we're waiting on one more witness. We believe this witness will shed light on some important details about the assets. Marcus's face twisted in disbelief. Witness? What? You got some random person coming to talk about my finances. Eleanor nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Yes, my client's father, Michael Caldwell. The room fell silent. Blake laughed, a harsh, dismissive bark of laughter. Her father? What is he going to do? Come in here with a farmhand's hat and tell us about land or some nonsense. This is absurd. Marcus turned to Derek, his eyes gleaming with amusement. She's grasping at straws. The old man is probably going to come in and beg me not to take everything from his daughter. This is going to be pathetic. But as the clock ticked and the minutes passed, the anticipation in the air began to shift. Jade wasn't the only one waiting. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavy, and Marcus's confidence began to waver. The doors at the back of the room creaked open. The weight of that single moment was enough to send a chill down Marcus's spine. The man who entered wasn't some humble farmer. He wasn't the kind of person Marcus expected. The figure that entered the courtroom exuded power. He was tall, dressed in a sleek, tailored suit that looked like it had been crafted by the finest hands in the country. He walked slowly down the aisle, each step deliberate, each movement calculated. The sound of his shoes clicking against the marble floor echoed in the room, amplifying the tension that was already building. He stopped at the back of the courtroom, his cold, steely eyes locking with Marcus's. For the first time since the proceedings began, Marcus felt a wave of doubt ripple through him. This wasn't a man to be dismissed. Marcus watched, his smugness beginning to falter. Who is this? Derek whispered. This can't be right. The man's gaze never wavered from Marcus. He stood there for a moment before speaking, his voice a low, controlled rumble. My name is Michael Caldwell, he said, and I am the controlling shareholder of the Caldwell Group. The room didn't just quiet down. It rearranged itself around the man's presence. Even the stale courtroom air felt like it had been replaced with something colder, sharper, and heavier. Michael Caldwell stood in the center aisle like a verdict that had already been decided. His suit wasn't flashy, but it was exact, tailored to a body that carried discipline the way other men carried jewelry. Silver hair cropped close, clean beard, calm eyes that didn't dart or beg approval. He looked like the kind of black man who didn't have to explain his power because every system in the room had already learned to recognize it. Marcus tried to hold his smile in place, like a mask that had been glued on too early. He kept his shoulders square, chin lifted, but the tiny shift in his breathing betrayed him. His brain was still trying to force this moment into a category that felt safe. Angry father, emotional outburst, desperate family. But nothing about Michael Caldwell was emotional. This wasn't rage. This was procedure. Jade rose slowly, not because she needed to perform, but because her body finally matched the truth she'd been carrying in silence. She wasn't trembling the way Marcus wanted her to tremble. Her palms weren't open and pleading. Her face was composed in a way that made the earlier helpless wife narrative die right there on the polished floor. She looked like a woman who had survived something privately and decided to stop dying politely in public. Standing beside her, her attorney didn't look emboldened by courage so much as relieved that the real support had arrived, like a person who'd been holding a door shut with bare hands and finally heard the lock click. Judge Harris straightened, not dramatically, just enough that anyone paying attention could see she was recalibrating. The court had a script for bitter couples and dishonest husbands. It did not have a script for this entrance. Marcus leaned toward Derek, speaking through his teeth, trying to keep his voice low, trying to keep his swagger from slipping. Derek didn't answer right away. He stared at Michael Caldwell the way a man stares at a plane. He didn't hear until it was directly overhead. Derek's throat worked as he swallowed something he couldn't afford to say out loud. Michael didn't rush to the stand. He didn't scramble for permission. He simply looked at the bench, then at Marcus, then briefly at Jade, just long enough to confirm she was steady, and then back to the bench. It was a small sequence, but it told the room everything. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to correct a record. Judge Harris asked for identification and relevance, because that's what judges do when the air gets strange. Michael complied with the calm precision of someone who had been in rooms where the stakes were higher than a divorce settlement. He stated his name clearly. He stated his relationship clearly. And then he stated the part that made Marcus's stomach tighten into a hard knot. He wasn't entering this courtroom to testify as a character witness or as a grieving parent. He was entering as an interested party with direct financial exposure to the misconduct being presented. Marcus felt the words, interested party, land like a hand on his neck. He tried to scoff, to roll his eyes, to act like this was theater. But the court reporter's fingers kept moving, recording everything. The bailiff didn't relax. The gallery leaned forward. Two men Marcus hadn't noticed earlier, sharp suits, quiet posture, watchful eyes, shifted slightly at the back wall like they were positioning themselves not for drama, but for containment. Derek stood up fast, too fast, as if speed could replace control. He objected. Words about relevance, words about procedure, words that were supposed to keep power where Marcus believed it belonged. Judge Harris didn't shut Derek down immediately, but she didn't indulge him either. Her tone stayed even, which made it worse for Marcus, because calm authority is what the powerful use when they don't need to win by volume. Michael's response didn't raise temperature. It lowered it. He indicated that he had documents, not accusations. Paper, not passion. Records, not rumors. And then, without stepping into theatrics, he nodded once toward one of the men near the back wall. The man moved with quiet efficiency and placed a slim case on the clerk's desk and a separate seal packet at the judge's request. It wasn't dramatic. That was the problem. Dramatic things can be dismissed as performance. Efficient things feel like inevitability. Marcus's confidence began to leak in small places first. The corners of his mouth stopped cooperating. His fingers tightened and loosened on the edge of the table. He adjusted his cuff like he could adjust the reality that was starting to take shape. Judge Harris glanced through the first pages, and her eyes changed, not wide, not shocked, just sharpened, like a lens snapping into focus. She asked Michael to summarize what he was presenting. Michael did, and the courtroom's temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The settlement proposal that Derek had sold as clean and procedurally perfect suddenly looked like what it had always been, a performance designed to bury truth under paperwork. The business assets acquired prior to marriage claim, questionable. The full disclosure claim, false on its face. The no hidden accounts claim, dangerous. Marcus sat still, but his mind wasn't still. It sprinted. It tried to back-calculate what Jade knew. When she knew it, how long she'd been planning. He hated that thought most, Jade planning. Jade having information. Jade not being alone. He looked at her, searching her face for panic, for uncertainty, for the old habit of shrinking. He didn't find it. What he found was something worse. A quiet distance, like she'd already stepped out of the marriage emotionally and was only present now as a witness to its burial. Michael's materials weren't just a counterargument. They were a map, a timeline, a chain of custody. The judge asked questions about transfers, entities, beneficiary structure. Derek attempted to answer, but his voice didn't carry the same polish now. The old confidence was gone. In its place was calculation and fear. Then Michael named the first account, not in a cinematic, gotcha way, in a matter-of-fact way. Numbers, dates, entity names that sounded harmless until you understood what they were meant to hide. Marcus felt the room turning toward him, not as a charming businessman anymore, but as a question that needed resolution. Derek tried to object again, but his objection sounded like a man swatting at smoke. Judge Harris asked for the origin of the information, because judges don't move on vibes. They move on evidence. Michael gave her origin, corporate compliance review, independent forensic accounting, internal audit triggers, a referral that began as routine and became impossible to ignore. He didn't say the words crime right away. He didn't need to. The judge could read what was sitting in her hands. Marcus's chest tightened. This wasn't supposed to be possible. He'd built his fortress carefully. He'd made sure Jade didn't have access. He controlled what she saw, what she signed, what she asked. He'd trained her over years to doubt her own instincts. He'd shaped a marriage so that even her anger felt like an inconvenience she had to apologize for. And yet here she was, standing straight, while a man with power and proof was dismantling him in public. The courtroom murmured as the pattern became clear. Shell entities connected to Marcus. Transfers timed suspiciously around the filing. Assets moved into places that looked like corporate structure but smelled like concealment. A car lease tucked under a business expense line. A housing agreement masked as executive relocation. A lifestyle stitched into spreadsheets like it belonged there. Marcus wanted to laugh. He wanted to explode. He wanted to stand up and call everyone ridiculous. But he felt something new creeping into his throat, the fear of being laughed at instead. Judge Harris asked Marcus directly if he disputed the authenticity of what was presented. Marcus opened his mouth. For a second, nothing came out. Not because he lacked words. Marcus always had words. But because the room had shifted into a mode where words could make things worse. He glanced at Derek like Derek was a lifeboat. Derek didn't meet his eyes. Derek looked at the papers like they were a trap snapping shut. Michael's calm voice continued, and that calm was its own humiliation. He explained that Jade had been too proud to ask for help, too determined to do it right, too committed to not being seen as someone who relied on family power. He explained that she tried to make the marriage work on dignity alone. He didn't dramatize it, but the implication filled the room. Marcus didn't just try to divorce her. He tried to erase her. Marcus's jaw tightened so hard his teeth ached. He didn't like the way Michael spoke about Jade like she mattered. He didn't like the way the courtroom listened. Judge Harris asked for the relevance to the divorce settlement. Michael gave it. The relevance was simple. If Marcus had attempted to misrepresent assets, the settlement couldn't stand. If he concealed funds, the court could impose sanctions. If he had used corporate channels to fund personal expenses while presenting himself as transparent, the case was no longer just a divorce. It was a legal mess spilling into bigger rooms. That's when the word referral appeared. Referral to authorities. Referral to oversight. Referral to investigation. Marcus felt cold sweat gather under his collar. He had worn his best suit because he thought he was attending a victory ceremony. Now the fabric felt like costume evidence. He tried to regain control by turning the story back into what he knew best. Embarrassment as a weapon. He looked at Jade and let his voice sharpen, trying to make her small again. He accused her of staging this, of playing victim, of manipulating sympathy. The words came out louder than he intended, because fear always makes people louder. Jade didn't flinch. She didn't lash back either. She answered softly, and that softness landed harder than shouting. She clarified that she didn't orchestrate anything. She just told the truth. She told it late, but she told it fully. And once the truth was spoken, it stopped belonging to Marcus. The room held its breath, not because it was waiting for a punchline, but because it was witnessing a shift in identity. Jade wasn't begging to be believed. She was explaining reality as if it was already decided. Marcus looked around for sympathy, for allies. The gallery's expressions weren't hateful. They were something worse, judgment mixed with fascination. People love watching a confident man realize he has no audience anymore. They love watching a performance collapse when the stage lights don't save you. Derek leaned in finally, voice low and urgent, telling Marcus he needed to sit down, stop talking, stop making it worse. Marcus heard Derek's tone change, and that change landed like betrayal. Derek didn't sound like a partner. He sounded like a man calculating distance. Judge Harris announced a brief pause to review the materials and determine next steps. Marcus expected relief from the pause. Instead, the pause felt like a drum roll for punishment, while the judge reviewed. Michael didn't comfort Jade loudly or put on a show of affection. He simply stood near her, close enough to anchor her, not close enough to infantilize her. It was a subtle thing, but it mattered. Jade's strength remained hers. His presence didn't replace it. It reinforced it. Marcus's phone buzzed once against his thigh. He tried not to react, but the reflex betrayed him. He glanced down quickly. A message from the woman he'd been promising the new life to, asking if everything was done yet. The words on the screen looked suddenly childish against the reality forming in the courtroom. Marcus didn't reply. He didn't trust his hands. Derek scribbled on a notepad like writing could build a wall. Marcus leaned back, forcing his posture into confidence again, but his knee bounced beneath the table. Every few seconds, he glanced at the back doors like he expected someone else to enter, someone to save him the way Michael had saved Jade. But Marcus didn't have that kind of love. He had transactions, and transactions don't walk into courtrooms to protect you when the truth is on the table. Judge Harris returned, and when she spoke, her tone made it clear the day had changed shape. She stated that the settlement could not proceed as presented. She stated that the court would consider sanctions and a redistribution of assets pending a deeper review. She stated that concealment, if proven, would be treated seriously. She stated that the court would not allow the legal system to be used as a tool for financial punishment disguised as procedure. Marcus felt something inside him crack. Not his heart, not remorse. Just the internal mechanism that had always assured him he could talk his way out. He tried to stand again, tried to interrupt, tried to reassert his narrative. The bailiff shifted closer, not threatening, just ready. Derek's hand caught Marcus's sleeve and pulled him down with a quiet violence that felt like humiliation in itself. And then Judge Harris asked a question that turned Marcus's mouth dry. Did he have anything to disclose now that he hadn't disclosed before? Marcus stared at the judge, then at the papers, then at Jade. Jade's face didn't gloat. That would have been easier. Her expression was something like closure mixed with disappointment, like she was looking at a version of him she couldn't believe she ever tried to love. Michael's voice returned, steady as steel, and he introduced the next layer. The part that didn't just dismantle Marcus's divorce strategy, but threatened the life he had built outside the marriage. He indicated that the financial concealment wasn't isolated to marital assets. There were patterns connected to Marcus's work, his expense claims, his vendor relationships. The kind of patterns companies investigate quietly before they investigate publicly. The kind of patterns that don't end with embarrassment. They end with consequences. Marcus's skin went hot under his suit. He wanted to deny everything. He wanted to call it a lie. But the evidence sat in binders like gravity. Denial wouldn't make it float. Judge Harris didn't issue the final ruling yet. She didn't need to. What she did instead was more terrifying. She set the direction. She ordered a full financial review. She paused the divorce settlement pending findings. She instructed counsel on both sides to prepare for a hearing focused on disclosure and misconduct. That meant Marcus didn't leave today as a winner. He left today as a suspect. As court staff began moving, as papers were collected, as whispers grew louder, Marcus realized something that made his throat tighten. The story wasn't ending here. It was just switching genres. This wasn't divorce victory anymore. This was a public collapse beginning in a room that was designed to record everything. Jade remained standing beside her father, but now she looked like she was finally breathing. Not joyful, not triumphant, just free enough to feel air again. Marcus watched that freedom settle into her posture, and for the first time, he understood he couldn't claw it back with insults. He had tried to win by shrinking her. Now the court was watching him shrink, and as Marcus gathered his things with shaking hands, he saw Derek hesitate, just a fraction, like a man weighing whether to exit with him or separate himself for survival. Marcus had always believed people stayed close to power. He had never considered what happens when the room decides you don't have it anymore. By the time they reached the doors, Marcus could feel eyes on his back like heat. He didn't turn around, but he didn't need to. He could already imagine the story the room would tell after he left. The husband who celebrated early, the wife who looked weak until she wasn't, the father who didn't enter to beg but to bury a lie. Marcus stepped into the hallway, expecting escape. Instead, the hallway felt like the corridor between who he used to be and who he was about to become. The hallway outside the courtroom felt narrower than it should have been, like the building itself had decided to lean in. Marcus Drake walked fast, shoulders stiff, jaw locked, his shoes striking the marble a beat too loud. He didn't look at Jade. He didn't look at her father. He didn't look at anyone. He moved like a man trying to outrun a sound that was already echoing behind him. Derek stayed close, but not close enough to be mistaken for loyalty. His voice dropped low, sharp, stripped of warmth. "Don't speak again. unless I tell you to. You don't text. You don't call anyone. You don't improvise. This just escalated. Marcus stopped abruptly. Escalated? He turned, eyes flashing. That man walked in here and hijacked my case. You're telling me to be quiet? Derek's expression didn't change. I'm telling you that everything you say from this point forward can become evidence. And right now, you are bleeding evidence. Marcus laughed once, short and hollow. You're acting like I've already lost. Derek didn't answer immediately. That pause was the answer. Across the hallway, Jade stood near a tall window, sunlight cutting across her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't celebrating. She was still, the kind of stillness that comes after years of noise finally shut off. Michael stood beside her, angled slightly away, giving her space instead of shelter. That choice mattered. It told anyone watching that she wasn't being shielded. She was being supported. Marcus saw it. He hated it. He stepped toward them before Derek could stop him. You think this is over? Marcus snapped, his voice sharp enough to turn heads. You think dragging him in there changes the facts? Jade turned slowly. Her eyes met his without hesitation. It changes the truth, she said, and that's all it needed. Michael didn't step forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He spoke the way men do when they don't need permission. You had a chance to end this cleanly, he said. You chose humiliation instead. Courts don't reward cruelty disguised as strategy. Marcus scoffed. You don't know what you're talking about. Michael's gaze didn't move. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And so does the judge. The elevator doors opened behind Marcus with a soft chime. He didn't get on. He stood there, breathing through his nose, forcing control back into his limbs. He straightened his jacket like posture could reset reality. This isn't over, Marcus said, aiming at Jade. You think you won because you embarrassed me for 5 minutes? Jade's response was immediate, calm, lethal. I didn't win because you were embarrassed, she said. I won because you told the truth too late. Marcus felt something shift behind his ribs. Not fear yet. Pressure. They separated after that. No dramatic exit. No shouting match. Just movement. Jade and Michael walked toward the opposite end of the corridor, their steps unhurried. Derek finally tugged Marcus toward the elevator. Inside, the mirrored walls reflected Marcus back at himself from every angle. His tie was slightly crooked. A faint sheen of sweat clung to his forehead. He adjusted both, irritated by how visible the cracks felt. You need to understand something, Derek said as the door slid shut. What just happened doesn't stay in family court. Marcus exhaled sharply. You think I don't know that? Derek's eyes stayed forward. I don't think you're accepting it. The elevator descended in silence. By the time Marcus reached the garage, his phone vibrated twice. He ignored it the first time. The second time, he didn't. He glanced down and saw a missed call from an unknown number, followed by a message that made his jaw tighten. Marcus Drake, this is compliance. We need to speak with you immediately regarding irregularities connected to your expense accounts. His stomach dropped. He looked up, scanning the garage like someone might be watching. It was empty. Concrete pillars. Dim lights. The illusion of privacy. He typed a response, deleted it, then shoved the phone into his pocket. No, he muttered to himself. This is pressure. That's all. Pressure. But pressure only works when there's something compressed. Across town, Jade sat in the passenger seat of her father's car, watching the city pass like she was seeing it for the first time. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. No shaking. No clenching. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for years was gone. You okay? Michael asked, not looking at her. She nodded. I didn't think I would be, but I am. He let that sit. Then carefully, you didn't have to do that today. She turned toward him. I had to stop protecting him. Michael nodded once. That was enough. They stopped at a quiet cafe a few blocks from the courthouse. Nothing flashy. Brick exterior. Long windows. The kind of place where conversations stayed, where they were spoken. Jade ordered coffee. Black. No sugar. She hadn't ordered it that way in years. While they sat, Michael slid a thin folder across the table. "There's more," he said. "Not courtroom theatrics. Real consequences. I didn't bring everything in there because judges hate ambushes, but it's already moving." Jade opened the folder slowly. Numbers, dates, corporate language she recognized now, even as she hadn't before. She didn't flinch. "Does this mean," she started. "It means," Michael said evenly, "that he doesn't control the timeline anymore." Back in the garage, Marcus peeled out faster than necessary, tires squealing against concrete. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping his phone, like it might confess something if squeezed hard enough. Another message came through. "Marcus, please confirm availability today. This is time sensitive." He slammed the steering wheel once. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said aloud. "I played smart." But the city didn't respond. Traffic didn't part. The light ahead turned red anyway. At his apartment, Marcus dropped his keys on the counter and paced. He poured a drink he didn't want and drank it too fast. His phone rang again. This time, the number wasn't unknown. It was her. He answered immediately. "Hey, what did you lie to me about?" The woman on the other end snapped. No greeting. No softness. Marcus froze. "What are you talking about?" "The apartment," she said. "The lease. They just called. Said I have to be out by tonight." Marcus swallowed. "That's a mistake." "They said your name." She shot back. "They said your employment status changed." Silence. "You told me you own everything," she continued. "You told me this was locked down." Marcus's mind raced. "Just give me a minute. I'll fix it." A laugh. Short. Disbelieving. "Fix it." She lowered her voice. "I saw your name on the news alert. You're being investigated." The word hit harder than any insult. "Don't call me again," she said, and the line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. Across the city, Jade finished her coffee and stood. She felt taller, not because she had gained power, but because she had dropped weight. Michael paid without comment. As they walked back to the car, Jade glanced once toward the courthouse in the distance. The building looked smaller now. "I don't want revenge," she said quietly. "I just don't want to be afraid anymore." Michael opened the door for her. "Then you're already ahead." As Marcus sat alone in his apartment, phone face down, drink untouched, he finally felt it. Not humiliation, not rage, but something colder. The realization that the story had turned without him. And this Marcus didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, fully dressed, shoes still on, staring at the faint glow of the city through the blinds like it owed him an explanation. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of traffic, the buzz of his phone lighting up again and again, the low mechanical breathing of man trying not to panic. By morning, the call stopped. That was worse. He showered, dressed, and forced himself into routine. Routine had always been his armor. He drove to the office anyway, badge clipped to his belt, posture rehearsed. The building's glass facade reflected him back in fragments, sharp angles, no softness. He told himself this was temporary noise. Lawyers fix noise. Money smooth noise. The lobby door slid open. Security didn't nod. That was new. "Marcus Drake?" One of them asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes," Marcus said, irritation flaring. "What is this?" "Badge," the guard replied. Marcus laughed under his breath and tapped the card against the scanner. "Red light. Try again," he snapped. The guard didn't move. "Sir, we need the badge." Marcus felt heat climb his neck. "This is ridiculous. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. The second guard stepped closer, calm, rehearsed. "Your access has been suspended pending review. You're expected upstairs." "Suspended?" Marcus repeated. "By who?" A woman in a navy blazer approached from behind the desk, tablet in hand. She didn't smile. She didn't rush. "Compliance," she said. "We've been trying to reach you." Marcus's chest tightened. He looked around the lobby. A few employees slowed, pretending not to stare. This wasn't how exits were supposed to look. Upstairs, the room was too clean, too white, no windows, a table for chairs, a recorder already running. Marcus sat alone on one side. Across from him sat two people he didn't recognize, and one he did. Someone from finance who wouldn't meet his eyes. "This is informal," the woman said, "but it won't stay that way if you lie." Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. "I don't understand why I'm here." She slid a folder across the table. Expense allocations, vendor contracts, shell entities. "We've identified patterns inconsistent with company policy." Marcus barely glanced at it. "That's impossible. Everything was approved." "Approved by who?" she asked. Silence. "Because according to our audit," she continued, "the approvals trace back to accounts you controlled indirectly." Marcus scoffed. "You're making assumptions." She tapped the folder once. "These aren't assumptions." Marcus stood abruptly. "This is retaliation. Someone is feeding you bad information." The man from finance finally spoke, voice strained. "Marcus, it's real." Marcus turned slowly. "You don't know what you're talking about." The woman didn't raise her voice. "You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Your accounts are frozen. Do not contact staff. Do not access company systems. Legal will be in touch." Frozen. The word landed like concrete. Marcus walked out without another word, aware of eyes on his back, aware that the room behind him wasn't debating his guilt. It was documenting his fall. By the time he reached the parking lot, his phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't compliance. It was his bank. Due to unusual activity, several accounts had been temporarily restricted. Marcus's hands shook as he unlocked the car. Across town, Jade stood in a bright conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The contrast was brutal. Sunlight poured in. The room smelled like fresh coffee and possibility. Michael sat beside her, but this time, others were there. Two attorneys, a financial advisor, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper posture. "This isn't about punishment," the advisor said. "It's about protection." Jade nodded. "I want clean separation. No leverage left for him." Michael watched her carefully, not with pride, with relief. They discussed timelines, asset recovery, next steps. Jade listened, asked questions, corrected assumptions. She wasn't inferring anymore. She was deciding. Once the court completes a review, one attorney said, the settlement shifts entirely. Attempted concealment changes everything. Jade exhaled slowly. "I don't want him destroyed." The room paused. "I just want him finished in my life." Michael nodded once. "That's the difference." Back in his apartment, Marcus dumped drawers onto the floor, searching for anything that could restore control. Documents, contacts, leverage. He dialed Derek. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He slammed the phone down, breathing hard. The walls felt closer now. The city outside didn't glitter anymore. It stared. A knock hit the door. Sharp. Official. Marcus froze. Another knock. Marcus Drake. A voice called. "Open the door." His mouth went dry. He opened it slowly. Two men stood there. Not police. Not yet. Suits. Badges clipped discreetly. Calm faces. "We need to ask you some questions," one said. "This won't take long." Marcus stepped back, letting them in. As the door closed behind them, he felt it, certainty settling in. The game wasn't paused. It had moved on. Marcus didn't sit when they told him to. He stayed standing in the middle of the living room, hands loose at his sides, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. The two men didn't rush him. They didn't threaten. They didn't need to. Calm was their leverage. "This is voluntary," the taller one said. "For now." Marcus laughed, sharp and defensive. "You people love that word." The shorter man glanced around the apartment, eyes cataloging details Marcus had once believed signaled success. Art he didn't understand. Furniture bought to impress people who never stayed. "We're just here to clarify a few transactions." Marcus folded his arms. "I already spoke to compliance. And now you're speaking to us." They asked questions in a way that didn't invite performance. Dates, amounts, names. Marcus answered fast at first, confident muscle memory taking over. He'd talked his way through rooms like this before, but then the questions narrowed. Follow-ups landed immediately. When he deflected, they circled back without emotion. You routed the payment through a consulting entity, the taller man said. Marcus shrugged. Standard. That entity has no employees. Outsourced. It shares a mailing address with your former personal assistant. Silence. Marcus shifted his weight. Coincidence. The shorter man slid a photo across the coffee table. A lease document. Marcus's signature. The address circled in red. Your signature doesn't believe in coincidences, he said. Marcus felt heat crawl up his spine. This is harassment. The taller man didn't blink. This is math. Minutes blurred, then hours. By the time they left, the apartment felt stripped of oxygen. They didn't arrest him. They didn't need to. They handed him a card and told him not to leave town. When the door closed, Marcus stood alone in the quiet, listening to his own breathing like it belonged to someone else. Across the city, night settled gently around Jade's house. She sat on the edge of the couch, phone in her lap, staring at a message she hadn't expected to feel relieved reading. Account secured. No further exposure. She exhaled, slow and deep, the tension she'd lived with for years releasing her shoulders like a held breath finally let go. Michael watched her from the kitchen doorway. You don't have to carry this anymore. I know, she said. And she meant it. They didn't toast. They didn't celebrate. Jade stood, walked a window, and watched traffic move like a system that didn't care about either of them. That felt right. Back in his apartment, Marcus poured another drink and didn't finish it. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Derek. Marcus lunged for it. Finally, Derek's voice was flat. I'm withdrawing. Marcus laughed weakly. You can't. I already did. You said we were a team. A pause. Then, teams don't hide landmines. Marcus felt something inside him drop. You're leaving me? I'm saving myself. The call ended. Marcus stared at the screen until it went dark. The next morning, he walked into the courthouse alone. No lawyer beside him. No confidence cushioning his steps. Reporters weren't shouting yet, but they noticed him. Cameras rose slowly, like predators waking up. Inside, the judge's tone was colder than before. New evidence had been submitted overnight. Financial concealment confirmed. Settlement voided. Assets reassigned. Marcus heard the words without absorbing them. The meaning came later, like bruises blooming after impact. When the judge finished, she looked directly at him. You attempted to weaponize the legal system. This court does not reward that behavior. Marcus stood there, empty-handed. Jade didn't look at him. That hurt more than anger. Outside, as officers approached, not urgently, not violently, Marcus finally understood the shape of his fall. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was procedural, and that made it permanent. By the time the cuffs clicked shut, Marcus Drake wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about how quiet everything had become, and how no one was coming to fill the silence. The holding room smelled like disinfectant and metal. Marcus sat on a hard bench, wrists resting where the cuffs had just been removed for processing, staring at a wall that didn't care who he used to be. The noise of the courthouse, footsteps, murmurs, phones, was gone now. This space had no audience, no leverage, just time. A public defender came and went, efficient, detached, already overwhelmed by cases heavier than his. Marcus heard the words, bail review, pending investigation, conditions, but they slid past him. What stayed was the absence. No Derek, no calls, no reassurance. Power, he realized, isn't taken from you all at once. It leaks out through exits you didn't notice locking. By late afternoon, he was released under conditions that felt like chains without weight. He walked out of the building slower than he'd ever walked into anything. Cameras waited this time. Not shouting, just recording. He kept his head down and felt the humiliation settle in quietly, like dust. Across town, Jade stood in a light-filled office overlooking the city she'd once felt trapped inside. The view was wide, clean, honest. She listened as terms were finalized, asset transfers confirmed, Protection secured, timeline set. When it was done, there was no applause, just a calm sense of completion. Michael watched her closely. "You don't owe anyone a speech," he said. "I know," Jade replied. "I just want to move forward." He nodded. "Then let's make sure forward is real." That evening, the city dressed itself for night. Marcus found work where no one asked questions. Temporary, cash-adjacent, invisible. The uniform didn't fit right. Neither did the silence. He avoided mirrors, avoided names, avoided the version of himself that still expected doors to open. The event hall was loud and elegant, filled with people who used to look like him. He carried trays, kept his eyes down, moved fast. It worked until it didn't. On stage, a woman stepped into the light. Jade. She stood centered, composed, not elevated by ego, but anchored by clarity. She spoke about rebuilding, about truth, about systems that reward accountability. The room listened, not because of her last name, but because she sounded like someone who had earned the right to speak. Marcus froze. He tried to turn away. He didn't make it far. "Watch it," someone snapped as he brushed past. He muttered an apology, heart pounding, and backed into a service corridor slick with rain. He leaned against brick, breathing hard, the city humming around him like it had already moved on. Marcus. He looked up. Jade stood under the awning, coat pulled close, expression unreadable. Not angry, not triumphant. Finished. "I didn't know you were here," he said. "I did," she replied calmly. "I saw your name on the staffing list." He swallowed. "I'm leaving." "I know." Silence stretched. Rain filled it. She reached into her coat and placed a card on the ledge between them. Not handed. Placed. "What's this?" he asked. "Work," she said. "A program my department is funding. Physical labor. Design builds. Honest hours. It pays. It has rules." Marcus stared at it. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," Jade said. "This isn't about you." He laughed softly, broken. "Then why?" She met his eyes. "Because I don't need to punish you to be free." The words landed heavier than any sentence the judge had spoken. Jade turned back toward the door. Before she went in, she paused. "Take it or don't. Either way, this is where my story ends with you." The door closed. Marcus stood alone in the rain, card damp in his hand. For the first time, no one was watching. No one was measuring him. He bent down slowly and picked it up anyway. Across the city, Jade looked out over the skyline from a place that finally felt like hers. She didn't feel victorious. She felt done. And that was the real ending. Not the fall of a man who celebrated too early, but the rise of a woman who never needed the celebration at all.